You're listening to the Mind Your Business podcast, episode number 62. Today, we're talking all about the power of your mind. So, stay tuned. Hi, I'm James Wedmore, and I've built a 7-figure internet business that offers the financial freedom to do what I want, when I want. And I'm the first to say that hard work and hustle are not essential ingredients for your success. So, how do you build a thriving business from the inside out? This is the Mind Your Business podcast, featuring myself and co-host Phoebe Mroczek. All right, hello, James Wedmore here.
And I'm Phoebe Mroczek.
And welcome to the Mind Your Business podcast. Thank you so much for joining us on a very, very special topic. I think, this is a big one for me. I think we have a lot of ground to cover, a lot of things to discuss. So this one, we're taking you down the rabbit hole a bit. We're going to go on a bit of a journey. Phoebe, are you ready?
I'm ready. I know this is a topic that you had told me a little bit about, so I'm excited to kind of dig deeper and find out exactly what happened and what spurred this kind of obsession for you, it sounds like almost.
This is the story of how I almost canceled my honeymoon. Ooh, there's a good cliffhanger. So I've told you a little bit of the details, but we tried to do minimal prep on this. This is one of those episodes where I'm going to share a story and kind of reveal it to Phoebe for the first time and introduce her to some things and kind of get her first reaction and create a great discussion around it. I'm excited to get into it. I have no other way, so we're just going to start telling a story. Does that sound good?
That sounds great. Let's get into it.
Okay, we have to rewind the clock back to my honeymoon. So for our regular listeners, you know I even did some episodes right before the honeymoon and even on the honeymoon, but I haven't told this story yet. So this was the end of summer, beginning of fall of 2016, and my wife and I are now in Croatia, 7 days in on our honeymoon of a 3.5 week honeymoon vacation. So we are in the country of Croatia, which is, I guess it's third world. You're out there a little bit. And we just come back from a day of sightseeing. We're at these beautiful waterfalls and lakes and stuff. And we're literally half a mile or less from our Airbnb that we were staying at. We got this nice little apartment. And we're walking down the harbor in the city of Split, Croatia. And there are these just massively impressive yachts just right there, docked right beside us. And I remember this specific thing that I did where I'm just geeking out about these beautiful, luxurious yachts right in front of me. And the windows were open and you could look right into the staterooms. I mean, these things are right next to us. Like, you could just touch them. And I remember I had a backpack on and I bent down like 45 degrees, bent my back down to try and get my head eye level to these portholes so I could look into the yacht. And as soon as I bent down, I just feel this snap. And this entire shot of pain literally like a lightning bolt struck through my entire spine, top to bottom. And I just remember my brain went into this adrenaline emergency moment. I got tunnel vision where all the outside world just completely turned off to me, and it was in the internal sirens are going on. I couldn't move. I could barely even stand back up. I just had to freeze immediately. Chelsea just kept walking and it was where'd he go, right? Because there were all these people and I just stopped and I couldn't move. I was frozen. And yeah, it was as soon as I bent down, I had this jolt of pain just hit me. And it wasn't even a bad movement. I mean, you could tilt your body down, bend at the waist 45 degrees. You're not going to get hurt by this, okay? The average person is not going to get hurt like this. So, Chelsea finally figured out something was wrong, and I couldn't move. I was kind of in this frozen position, afraid to move again for what might happen. She takes me home, and it took a very long time. It was light baby steps. We just looked like I'd never walked before. I was in severe rehab or something, just trying to get it out. And of course, we're 3 flights up in this apartment. And it got worse and worse to the point that evening, I don't know how far you want me to go into where I was internally, in my mind.
Take us there.
Take us there.
I want to know all.
I was scared for my life, and I know Chelsea was. I was thinking all kinds of scenarios. You know, your mind does that, right? You play out these awful scenarios. Like, I was afraid that, like, I literally was afraid to move because I thought I was in so much pain that I thought like I had dislocated my back or something. Like, you know, who knows, if you don't know medicine or chiropractic or anything, like, you don't know what could be wrong. But when you feel that pain, you're like, something is wrong with my back, a slipped disc, dislocated something, pinched nerve. I don't know. Am I going to be paralyzed? I don't know. Is this my life for the rest of my life now? I don't know. But it was hours of uncomfortable, like, frozen in pain, and then you kind of like move a little bit and it just shoots this jolt of pain down your entire body, and you're just like, I was screaming out in pain, like literally out loud, and poor Chelsea just had to stand by, like so helpless, not knowing what to do. She's jumping into these Facebook groups of Americans living in Croatia. She finds a Facebook group and she's like, please help, my husband can't move, we're stuck in Croatia. It was a Sunday of all things, you know, so like nothing's open, and we just didn't know what to do. I'm going through worst case scenarios, and that evening, you know, I basically said, okay, the most important thing, luckily it was like a 2-story place we had, so the bedroom was upstairs. I was like, you just go to bed, you need a full night's sleep. I can't sleep. I couldn't lay down, I couldn't get comfortable, like nothing. So I just sat in a chair, propped up in a way that wouldn't hurt me, and just kind of stared out to space and let my mind wander. And there was like these decisions that came up of like, we're booking a flight tomorrow. Like, I'm going to wait. I'm going to give her a full night of sleep. She wakes up. I'm going to tell her we need to go home and we need to go see a doctor and we need to handle this immediately. That was my decision because it was just so bad. And then of course your brain goes, well, what am I going to do? How am I going to get on the plane? How am I supposed to sit on a plane for hours? And our honeymoon is ruined. I mean, we're a fourth of the way in on this thing, and we're in a third world country, basically. I'm like, we're not going to a doctor out here. We don't know if that's safe at all. So that's where I was. And that was where it got the deepest and darkest. It was kind of like accepting, like, it's over, we got to go home. And I probably have something like a slip disc. I have something that's seriously structurally wrong with me, and it's time to go. So long story short, you know, hours of laying there, 3, 4 in the morning, not sleeping, your mind just, you know, you got to keep it occupied. And there was a calmness that came over me of not trying to resist this, not trying to fight this, and not trying to fix it in the left brain, very masculine way of just kind of like, okay, this is the situation I'm in. Let's accept it and lay out on the table what else is possible. And, you know, after that initial like pain and shock and fear kind of resides a little, you kind of get into like, all right, problem solving. And I remember 3 or 4 in the morning making the decision, like, wait a second, like, I have years of like healing training and I know this stuff, especially conceptually. Like, I've never had anything major physically wrong with me. I've been very blessed health-wise in my life. And I'm like, wait a second, this is a chance to take a lot of this stuff that I know conceptually and put it into practice right now. And so this knowingness, this conviction, this decision of, I'm going to fix this and we're going to be fine, kind of just came over me. And the next thing I did is I kind of went into this meditative state and started asking. You guys have heard me say it before on this podcast. The quality of your life is determined by the quality of questions you ask. And so I just kind of asked questions. I kind of asked for a sign. I asked for guidance. I asked, like, what is the best thing, you know, for me and my highest good to heal myself? Like, I even said things like, I'm ready to be healed. I choose to heal myself, right? And the craziest thing happened. You guys can call me crazy. It's fine. I like it. I like it a little bit. I got like a flash, an image, and the image was a memory, right? I just had a memory pop into my head. Have you guys ever had that happen where like you just have it's like a ghost memory of something that happened years ago that isn't even connected to a conversation you're having? It's just like, whoa, why did I think of this, right? This had nothing to do. It's like how I even remembered this. It was a forgotten memory, truly. 4 years ago or more, it was a memory of me walking on the beach. I know exactly where it was, like to the step. I could go take a photo of me in the exact spot, downtown Laguna, on the boardwalk, right next to the lifeguard tower. And I was listening to a podcast, bizarrely enough. And the podcast was the I Love Marketing podcast. And it's weird because I've only listened to a handful of their episodes. And I was like, why? Why is this coming up? Like, why am I seeing this right now? and I asked that question, all of a sudden I remember what I was listening to. And it was Joe Polish talking and ranting and raving about a guy who helped him solve his chronic back pain. And as soon as I remembered that that's what the episode was about, I was just like, holy crap, oh my gosh. And I just like went into action mode, and I was like, I don't know the episode, I don't know the guy he interviewed, whatever. So I just typed in, I love marketing, back pain, into Google on my phone. Sure enough, there pops up the episode in Google, and he's interviewing a guy, Steve Ozanich, and a book called The Great Pain Deception. So I've taken this long story out. So I want to just tell you in a nutshell what happened next. I immediately downloaded the digital Kindle version of the book to my iPhone, and I began reading at 3 or 4 in the morning. Fast forward 2 days later, I went from afraid for my life, like, am I going to be paralyzed? Did I do something structurally permanent damage to my back, to my spine? And will I have to cancel my honeymoon? To 2 days later, cliff jumping and swimming in the water. Completely healed.
Wow.
Like, for me personally, the greatest miracle that I have ever experienced. And for me, I've seen other people have extraordinary miracles. I look back at even how painful that was as such a gift and such a lesson. I'm truly thankful to have that. And now I am like, I have a lot of friends and family that listen to the podcast, and they already know that I have been preaching this book like no other. I am putting it in my top 5 best books I've ever read. And the next thing I did, as soon as I finished reading it, I didn't even wait until I was done. But by the time I was healed, I went to Chelsea and I was like, you need to be reading this book too. And she was like, like, it doesn't excite you. Like,
right.
A book about back pain? Boring. No, that is not it at all. And we're going to get into it this episode. We're going to go deep. The introvert in me, like, we're going to look at this from every angle possible. But the nutshell of it is this, folks, is that we actually went to go to a massage therapist. We called him up and all that stuff. And he's like, well, on a scale of 1 to 10, what's your pain right now? And I'm like, well, when I move, it's an 11.
Oh.
When I don't move and I'm careful not to move, it's like a 4, right? So you're fine when you're not moving. It's when you move. Oh, so painful. And I went from an 11 to a 0 in less than 3 days. It was that evening and then 2 more days. And it was, like a magic trick. Like, it just, wait, what? Like, it's not there anymore. And it all happened within the pages of this book, and we're going to give you a synopsis of it. I'm going to give you the premise around it, and the overall theme is just such an example of the power of your mind. And, as we talk about deep subjects, we talk about energy and, vibration and frequency and manifestation and beliefs and all that stuff. This is just another way of approaching all of that, but seeing unbelievable proof. Like, if you're one of these, I'm skeptical. I've always been a skeptical type person. It's in my nature, but that's the other reason why I really want to be diligent about being open-minded, practice open-mindedness. And, there are times that I really resisted all these topics that we end up talking about on the show, but nothing has given me more like physical, tangible proof, more of an experience of evidence than when it comes to the effect you can have on your own body and this connection that we call the mind-body connection. And that's what we want to talk about here today. So I thank you, Phoebe, and listeners, for letting me kind of share this story, because I've been wanting to get it out there for a long time. I didn't want to shorten it and just be like, oh yeah, I had back pain and now it's gone. Like, I really wanted you guys to get that this was, wow, just like a miracle transformation that happened for me. So yeah, that's it. The book is called The Great Pain Deception. We're going to go through all of it in just a moment.
Well, first I want to say I totally know what that feels like. And I think for listeners, if you haven't experienced back pain, some of this, I just remember I actually ruptured my disc in my senior year of college just by sitting up and literally coughing, like a tiny little cough. And they're like, oh yes, ruptured disc, no problem. And I just kept thinking only, older people have back problems. I was, 21. I'm like, this isn't me. This should not be happening to me. And even if you haven't experienced back pain, I think those of you who have probably listened to James's stories like me, or his story now, and we're like, oh my gosh, I know what that feels like, that like lightning pain. That is just so terrible. But if you haven't, this is still, it's so much bigger than that. And so I would really encourage you to just keep your mind open and listen to kind of the concepts of this, because I haven't finished the book. I know you gave it to me, and I've been kind of a little ADD around books and audiobooks and everything. So haven't finished it, but I have been researching stuff like this since that happened to me, 10 years ago.
Well, and I think you introduced something I really want to get into about this whole ruptured disc concept. But to echo what Phoebe is saying, like if you've experienced anything chronic, like, oh, I always have this flare up, or I'm always having lower back this, or mine was upper back, by the way. It was all from, if you want to do from the chakra, it was all chakra 4. I mean, it was upper back type stuff. But this is not just for someone who's dealt with anything chronic. Like, I'm even going to get into challenging this whole trend that's become so popular in the last couple of years about, sitting is like the most dangerous thing. I'm going to call total BS on that. You've heard this. We've kind of talked about it on some episodes, right? That like how dangerous sitting is for you, and that you need to be in a standing desk. By the end of this episode, it's my theory based on, all the information we'll provide, it's total BS. Mm-hmm. And that's hard because there's like, no, there's so many statistics and so many things. Yes, but it's always through the perception or the lens that you choose to look at something. So to bring the perfect example is if Phoebe feels pain when she goes to a doctor, the doctor says, well, clearly you have a ruptured disc. And, when I talk to this massage therapist out in Croatia, the first thing he says is like, well, you probably have a slipped disc. Well, the first thing that, all this comes from a gentleman by the name of Dr. Sarno. And the first thing he talks about is that there's no such thing as a ruptured or slipped disc, or even things like a pinched nerve. And so what we'll get into, and again, it's controversial. It's things that most people that are had this pain their whole life are going to reject. See, I didn't. I was like, screw it. I'm open. Like, I'll do whatever it takes. I think most of our listeners are that way. But if you try and bring this to like your spouse or someone you care about who's been dealing with something for years, like just be careful, be mindful, because they're going to say, no, I've been to 3 doctors and this is what they say I have. And you want to question all of that because, in a nutshell, well, I mean, we're going to get into it. There's so much to cover. So let's start with what he diagnoses chronic pain as it might be, what it might be. So there might really be something, like if you stub your toe, like you're going to feel pain, and that pain is coming from hitting your toe against the wall or the bedpost, right? But what Phoebe mentioned, there was a theme in what Phoebe said, in what happened to her and what happened to me, which is if you have great severe pain that is chronic, like it comes up again and again, usually in the same spot, and it was triggered by something that is harmless, like bending down, not bending all the way over with like some, heavy stuff, like a TV in my hands, but like slightly leaning over, or how Phoebe described, like it was something harmless that I did, and you get a massive spike of pain, chances are it's TMS. And in the book, they go all through the different like symptoms of how you know that it's TMS. So TMS is defined as tension binaural syndrome, but they really create a new definition of it, which is they call the mind-body syndrome, TMS. So it shows up predominantly, especially for men, in the back, lower back pain especially, but it can show up really anywhere. It can show up as a pain from like kind of like muscle or structural type thing, like a back pain or a neck pain, but can also show up as something like carpal tunnel. It could show up as something like skin stuff. I know a lot of people that have dealt with like, skin-related chronic issues. Even chronic fatigue is one of these. And this is why I really lump what people are saying about sitting into this. So this is what they call it, TMS. And so I start reading this book and I'm like, they go through the symptoms. They're like, is this something that is triggered by the most harmless of activities? And I'm like, yes, check. And so I was really clear right from the get-go that, okay, I'm open to this. This is TMS. Let's go for it. So, the book is called The Great Pain Deception. And what we want to start out by saying here is that it's not that there is an illusion that the pain is not real, because I think that's what people are going to hear and really reject that. It's that we may not have properly diagnosed the source or cause of the pain. And that's the misnomer. So for me, when the back started hurting, my brain went into all these places like, I have a slip disc. I have a pinched nerve. My back has fallen out of alignment. Something like that, right? Those are structural causes. And what happens, which I am so grateful and fortunate that this did not happen to me, but as the book shares and reveals numerous studies, is that the average person will have an experience like this. They'll go to the doctor, and the doctor will reinforce through physical evidence that there is, oh, yep, you've got this, you've got that. Just like the doctor told Phoebe, like, you have a ruptured disc. And what happens in your mind as soon as that happens? Like, oh, crap, there's something wrong with me. We baby it. We stop moving our back. We nurture it. We kind of have, that crutch of like, okay, well, I can't bend this way. I can't move this way. I'm going to stay off it, etc. And the big argument that's really made in the book and with Dr. Sarno's work is that, and I just love this, is like, look, the back is so much stronger than we realize. I mean, we come from ancestors who are carrying giant boulders and trees and stuff like this. And here we are in our, for some of us, like myself, my 30s, for Phoebe in her 20s, and all of a sudden our back has failed on us. And so what the book argues is that we always have funky things, like a disc gets worn down over time and, things happen to us. But is the source of pain that structural damage, or is it something else? Because what Dr. Sarno also discovered is that there are people with massive structural issues, like their discs have just been worn away. They cite no pain whatsoever. And that was his first kind of step into really starting to question where is this pain coming from then? Someone else has an even worse thing going on with their discs or with their back or whatever, but reporting no pain. And so what TMS proposes is that the source of the physical pain is simply repressed emotional pain. And it's all emotion, it's all energy. So it is real pain. I mean, trust me, anyone wants to try and come to me and tell me that my pain wasn't real, I'm going to give them some real pain, right? It was absolute real pain. But what's in question is the cause and source of that pain. And to link it to our emotional state, our vibrational state, or energy state is the opportunity for you to heal yourself. And the thing is, when Chelsea started reading the book, my wife, she's like, man, this is so beneficial even for me because there are times I get stressed and I can just feel this tension in my neck and shoulders. So here I was healing myself, and we're going to show you how simple and easy it is if you're dealing with any type of pain. The first step is read the book, reading the book alone. Because I've told this story to people, and they're like, so what did you have to do? What were the steps? And I'm like, I read the book. And they're like, I know, and what were the steps? I'm like, I read the book. And what did the book tell you to do? No. I can't explain it any more simply than that. The book gives you, just by the process of reading it, knowledge and awareness. And it's in the awareness that it dissolves. It's like shining a flashlight. When you take the flashlight into a dark room and you shine it into a darkest corner, what happens to the darkness? I mean, there's no darkness. When you take the flashlight of your mind, of your consciousness, of your awareness, and shine it on the source, and you finally find the source, gone. And so what I found myself doing is, when it was in the worst of pain, Phoebe, I would try and turn my neck 2 degrees. I couldn't do it.
Oh, I'm just shaking my head. I know what that feels like.
Oh, yeah.
Awful.
And at the worst, when I looked in the mirror, one of my shoulders was way higher than the other. I was kind of leaning. I looked all crooked, Hunchback of Notre Dame, frozen in this contorted, it just looked like my whole body was out of alignment because my muscles were now trying to lock into a specific place. But as I started going through the book, I would keep practicing my range of motion. It was just the most amazing thing. I start turning my head, and I could feel the pain, and I just sat there, and then I kept moving. And it was like the pain just dissolved and my neck opened up and I could rotate it a little bit further and a little bit further. And it just was gone.
Sorry, one thing. What I love about this is just the scenario that you are in, because had you been in Laguna Beach, you would have been able to be, Chelsea could have brought you to a hospital. They would have heavily medicated you probably. And until, the pain kind of dissipated, as opposed to this, you were in a situation where you were forced to actually deal with the issue at hand, as opposed to, being brought in and people looking at you and reinforcing the fact that, yes, you slipped a disc and yeah, you're going to be put on all these meds and you're not going to feel anything. You're not going to feel your face for 3 weeks, and just be laid up. But now, this presented itself in such the perfect way for you to actually have to deal and address the pain at hand.
Absolutely. It was like, we're going to give you no other ways for you to get an easy out. And that is the problem. They talk about this in the book, is that this guy really went on a mission. The author really went on a mission to help people. And people are like, honestly, like, if I could just get a pill or a surgery, I'd rather have that. What? That's crazy. Like, people want the magic pill or they want the quick fix. Okay, so what happens by the beauty of reading through this book is you discover for yourself that it is the cause, the source of this is ultimately us, as within, so without. That, our external body is a physical manifestation or expression of what is going on internally. And so when we have a physical pain, what it means is there's just blocked energy, blocked emotion, or repressed emotion. There is a stuckness of energy. So some of you guys still might be, well, what does that mean, right? And they talk about how that really shows up. Is that when the emotional energy is repressed, it causes this inner tension. But what's happening biologically, I guess, is that the muscle and nerve tissue is not receiving enough blood flow or oxygen. Okay, so it can't heal itself. It can't. And it takes your awareness, the power of the mind. And it goes into all these examples of people who got surgeries and felt fine for a little bit, and then it came back. Or, they got a surgery one place and the pain was gone, and pain shows up somewhere else and then somewhere else. And it just, you keep chasing this pain around. So I think out of this 400 plus book, there was a piece in the book that really clicked for me, really made me get it. And then we'll kind of get to what I had to do internally to heal myself, because it's a personal internal journey for you. But again, we must accept that pain is an effect, and it's an effect of you of what's going on internally. So it's really an expression. The external pain is an expression of who you are, or who you're being, or what's going on internally. And so the thing that really got it for me to make sense was he referred back to Freudian psychology with the concept of the id, the superego, and the ego. So I think most of us remember taking some sort of psychology class and learning about this. I remember learning about it and going, I don't get it. Do you remember? Did you learn all this stuff?
We did, and I was like, it's just confusing. I don't really get it because I wasn't given real examples.
Yeah, I don't know. And then, of course, we always talk about things like, oh, that's just your ego, or leave your ego at the door, bro. So you always hear this term ego, and you're like, you kind of understand that, right? Mm-hmm. But there is this beautiful dance. I don't know if it's beautiful, but there is a dance that's happening between all three, and it was explained so well, so I'm going to do my best to explain it to you. So we're going to start first with the id, ID. And he uses, this analogy that the id is like the kid. This is the selfish child within you that he argues, or Freud would argue, that we all have. This is the part of you that has those primitive, selfish urges and desires. I guess this is maybe the person that you would become if you were the last person on the planet. And it didn't really matter what anyone thought of you or of how you acted, because there'd be no one but yourself. This is, if you look at a young child, you really do see the id. They cry when they don't get their way. They complain. They can whine. But how come we don't do that as an adult? People say, well, because we mature. And I don't argue that. But are there times in our lives when something happens and there are a part of us that does want to kick and scream and complain and yell and fight and cause a tantrum because we didn't get our way? And I would say yes. And this actually becomes the source of it. So that brings us to the superego. And this is the antithesis to the id. So if the id is the selfish child, The superego is the respectable parent. This is the part of you that is the perfectionist, that desires to conform to society. Now, there's a word that gets thrown around a lot too, which I really like. People talking about their authentic self, their true self. You've heard that before, right? Like, that's you're being so authentic, like your authentic self.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, this is not it. This is what you would call the false self. This is the part of you that strives for perfection, that cares about looking good and being right. It's what we believe, and it's not necessarily what you believe. It believes. Like, think of it as like these two people inside of you. It wants for us to be what it believes others want to see in us. It has this idyllic image of who we are supposed to be, how we're supposed to show up in society. No mistakes, polite and kind, all the things, right? Think of the highest bar that you could possibly set for yourself, and that starts to represent this pull of the superego. So obviously, if you put the id and the superego together, you have conflict naturally. They do not work well together, right? Is this making sense so far?
Yeah, definitely. I think for the superego, it's a lot of like morality based. Is that correct?
Oh, absolutely. But I think it's morality. Like, the question you have to ask, how philosophical do you want to go here, is like, how relevant is morality if you were the only person on the planet? Mm-hmm. Like, isn't morality have something to do with to some standpoint, like the conforming to society or the safety, the protection of society?
Right.
So there is a pull there to conform to society, to be seen by the public as perfect. And then obviously the id does not care at all about that, which is why a young child does not care if it cries in public and makes a scene. You see it all the time. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is where the ego comes in. The ego knows that the id and the superego do not get along. So it actually becomes the referee. It's the buffer to balance the two out. Okay? So what that means then is the ego, according to Freud and how we can relate this all back to the conversation, becomes the face or personality of the individual to the world. It's a compromise. It's still not this authentic real self, but it's a compromise. It's somewhere in the middle. It's trying to have it both ways, okay? Because you can't be the id and the superego at once. So the ego tries to like lock in something that you can be, okay? So what does any of this have to do with all this stuff that we're talking about? Well, TMS, or this chronic pain that we experience over and over again, the source of it, the cause, is this conflict when the ego pushes the id's needs and desires onto the back burner. That's where the repression begins. So I want to give an example. So I'm going to read an excerpt of an example from the book, The Great Pain Deception. And it's using a gentleman by the name of Jedediah. So here we go. Jedediah's wife has suddenly died. His id, the kid version, wants to scream and kick and fall on the ground in a tantrum. Or even worse, as in suicide. The pleasure, comfort, and love Jedediah has lost from his wife's separation are too threatening and powerful to express in an environment with outside observers. Right? You see, that's where the conflict begins. His natural urge is to just like let loose, but he's conflicted by the fear of how people will perceive him. So his ego, the referee, counsels his superego, and they pull closer together to act as his family and his society would expect him to. Now, even when I say that, how many of us can start to look at the areas in our life where we behave based on the way we feel we are supposed to, that we're expected to? Jed handles it like a man, right? And that's in quotes. But he doesn't know that he is not handling it at all, because his superego silently hides the magnitude of his fury from him inside his body, his unconscious mind. It's a repressed emotion. Without his conscious knowledge, right? He has no idea this is happening to him. He simply casts his furious, deadly rage and panic into his body. His new acute back pain is a message of psychic conflict within. He feels as though he has slipped a disc, but he is only buried id. Okay, Phoebe, what do you think? Thoughts?
Oh man, as you're reading that, I was like, oh my gosh, a lot of this is making sense to me, especially my own ruptured disc. So I'm excited. How does that sit with you? I mean, obviously you kind of went through this whole experience, but when you're going through this pain and you're reading this book, is all of that like clicking for you immediately? Are you like, oh, now I know the source of it? Or were you like, all right, let's dig deeper and, explore?
It was instant and immediate. But I feel like when you're someone who's entrenched in personal development, you have a desire to always be growing and looking, there comes a point in time where you realize like, okay, I can grow all I want, but at the end of the day, I'm the only one in my way. And there has to be these things that we've talked about in the past called blind spots. Things that we can't see. And that's exactly what was just referenced in that story. He had no idea that he was doing this. You don't see it. And it takes an amount of willingness, courage, and discipline to look for it. To realize that, like, I might be doing something to try and look good for others, to try and please others, to try and keep it all together, right? And so, for me, this was very easy for me. And he actually talks about this as a specific time in the book. He goes, one of the symptoms is, as I mentioned earlier, is like you do the most innocuous movement and you get a 10 pain. I'm like, yeah, that was me. That sounds like you, right? But the other thing is that he shares what one of the big examples of a symptom is where if you've been in a prolonged stress-induced period and now that period is over. And I was like, bingo. So, my experience was we went from wedding planning, which, even though we had a wedding planner and that was amazing and we worked with a great hotel to get the wedding, like that's a stressful time. And when your wife works in the business and so she's away from those things, we had a very stressful, time like any wedding planning would be for most people. And then we went right into that from like the biggest launch and new product and all this type of stuff. So it was like go. It was a very go year. And we actually, something we're very proud of, we did the entire launch, like start to finish, in one of the shortest time frames we've ever done. It was like 35 days. We executed an entire launch. And that was like, a pretty big record for us. But it was 35 days nonstop every day. And, for someone like me where it's so important to not be working like that, there was a real internal conflict of that I put too much on my plate, I put too much pressure on myself, that I, sacrificed my health and lifestyle for that pace. But I knew it was short term. But then immediately after you go from fight or flight, go mode into telling your body and your subconscious and your mind, now it's relaxation time. That's when it can go, okay, great. So we're not going to, we weren't going to hurt you or, bring physical pain to you when you were in the adrenaline kicked mode, because you need to get your stuff done. But now that things have settled down, we're going to have you point your attention on this. And so for me, it was that's why it happened in 2 days. I was like, oh, got it. Okay, I totally understand where this is coming from. Time to chill. And I receive this and blah, blah, blah. I mean, it's that simple awareness of knowing that the source, that this had nothing to do with me bending over, not bending over and touching the ground, folks. This is like, if you're straight up and down and you didn't even go to a 45-degree angle hinging at the hips. I literally just like maybe 10 degrees. That's what happened until I turned my head sideways when I did it, right? So I can do that right now, no pain. So why then, right? And I got that very quickly, but I can only imagine if it had been 10 years of this pain and 10 doctors or 20 doctors telling me I had slip discs, I had, whatever stuff that they would continue to tell you, and you need this, you got to take these steroids, and you got to take those drugs, and you got to be on this pain medication, and you got to do these rehabilitation things, that it would reinforce mentally a belief that perpetuates the pain and the problem. And the repressed feelings or emotion would still be there, and it would only get worse because you wouldn't learn the lesson.
Yeah, when I heard you read that passage, that is literally what happened to me. Like my freshman year, my dad passed away. 4 years later, I'm having this terrible pain, and not only that, but I had a ruptured disc, and at the same time, I had bronchitis and pneumonia.
Yeah.
So I would cough because I had bronchitis, and then I would hurt my back, and then I was just like a big ball of crying mess. And, as you were reading that, I was like, oh my gosh, that is so telling. That's literally what happened, because I had to bottle everything up and be okay for everybody and make sure that, I wasn't the kid screaming on the floor being all sad. I had to really pick myself up and be like, nope, this is okay. We move on. This is what we do in our family. So that's really interesting.
That's it at all. Now, this is something, do you, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being absolute hell yes, where would you rate yourself on describing yourself as a perfectionist?
I mean, on the podcast, I want to be like, oh no, I'm only a 5.
Yeah, but if you were being truthful and weren't letting the ego show up for this, where do you, internally, where would you say you fall as a perfectionist?
I'd say I'm probably an 8.5.
Yeah. The symptoms for this are very common for those that, if you do a real gut level check, would define themselves or admit or accept that you have perfectionistic tendencies. Mm-hmm. And I do in some areas and don't in others. And I've actually way dropped the perfectionism over the years in some areas. But then you see it, when you're a personal brand, you want the things that you put out there to be better than everybody else's. You want it to be perfect, right? And entrepreneurs in general are really like that. While in other areas of my life, I'm just whatever, when I'm in my office, I'm in board shorts and a t-shirt. And I'm I don't really care. That's how I like to dress around the office. But you see that come up. And that is what they talk about in this book, is such a common thing. So, and Phoebe, going back to your story, this is why, could you imagine reading this and being holy crap? And if you're reading it while you we're going through the, symptom of the ruptured disc, how this could be the most transformative experience that someone can face. I literally am feeling the pain dissolve. And Chelsea wouldn't believe me. She saw me not able to move. She saw me in tears, screaming. And 2 days later, I just said, well, watch this. And you were sitting out on this beach club deck, we had these little lounge chairs or whatever, and we're laying out there, and I said, watch this, and I just dove into the ocean or the sea, and she was just what? From 8 feet up or something, and she's how that, what? And I swam away. I feel fine. I couldn't lift my arms up, and now I'm reaching overhead and pulling me in the water. But what I want to say is that this is great for you to recognize that. What we have to also recognize is that even something that happened 4 years ago can stay repressed and hidden for our entire life. And what will happen is, if we're still, it just shows up, and it'll pop up in an existing injury, right? That one time you might have hurt your ankle or hurt your leg, and you do the dumbest little thing, and all of a sudden your ankle or your leg flares up again. And you're dude, come on, I barely did anything, but it's an existing injury. Well, that is the logical part of your brain rationalizing, well, it's a sensitive area because I've been injured there before. No, it's literally that ego just saying, well, we're going to put the pain here for you. And what I thought was just so great is that it's we don't want you to feel this emotionally, or you refuse to feel it emotionally. So we're going to make you feel it physically. And if you really look at it as my body's trying to tell me something, and it's really trying to get my attention, what's the lesson here? What am I here to learn? That, that healing process can begin. But the author of this book was dealing with very tragic things in his life. And I'll save that for the book, because it's just unbelievable. Just your jaw is dropped the entire time of what this gentleman struggled with his life. And he repressed it all. And I think it was 30 years of pain. It was unbelievable. Like it started when he was 14 years old and it went on into his like 40s or 50s. And it's just like unbelievable that it just kept showing up years and years later, because he had decided, thanks to, doctors and stuff, that this is a structural problem. Or, well, because your leg is, a quarter inch shorter, your left leg is a quarter inch shorter than your right leg, then you're gonna need a surgery and blah 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 blah. And he tried everything. It wasn't until he did what we're talking about here in this book, because he's the author of it, obviously, that he's now been like pain-free for more than 10 years, I think. That's when he wrote in the book, and the book is definitely a couple years old at least. So miraculous. So to sum up this id, superego, and ego, there's a quote we found from Sigmund Freud that says, "A symptom is a sign of and a substitute for the instinctual satisfaction which has remained in abeyance. It is a consequence of the process of repression." The ego is able, by means of repression, to keep the idea, which is the vehicle of the reprehensible impulse, from becoming conscious. So it all stems back to this idea of repressing a piece of our true nature or our deepest urges and impulses. Again, I don't know how anybody else is going to take this episode, but this is something that I just was like, I have to share. The book is like 400 pages long, and I am scratching on the surface. I know a ton of you probably have so many questions, so I can't stress enough to just dive in. The solution here for me was simple. It's about creating or fostering that deeper level of awareness for what's going on in your body, mentally, emotionally, etc.
So let me ask you a question. Now that you have this awareness and you've read the book and you've been studying this and you've actually seen it, really transform your, bad experience, do you now, what are the questions now you ask yourself when you do experience pain? Is it that like, what am I repressing? Or is it, okay, where am I feeling it? What does that mean? I'm going to go back to the book. Like, what level of expertise do you kind of feel like you're at right now? And what does that awareness actually do for you? What does that process look like?
So I had a little pain come back in like a week ago, where it just like, it felt like a pinched nerve in my back. And it's like, ooh, that's a little tight. And I compared to how I've had that in the past versus now. And in the past, it was like your brain, I don't know about everybody else, but like my brain is always, and I assume this is most people, you're trying to like create connections with your brain. So you're trying to say, if you feel pain, you're trying to get to the origin of it. And so the old me was looking for like, did I sleep wrong? I think I slept wrong last night. I don't even remember. How did I sleep wrong? I think I did. I slept on the wrong side or something. Or you're sitting there going like, oh, maybe I did something at the gym. Yeah, I was doing a new workout. This is probably what it's at. And you leave it at that. Right? I don't know if anyone else is at, but that's what I was doing. The difference now is I'm saying, okay, there might be something I'm not dealing with here. And I look back to how I've been acting, behaving, my emotional state for the past week. I just need to go back a week now. I don't need to go back, 6 months or a year. I can, because I really feel like I've cleaned a lot of that up, that I can just look back to the very short-term past. And that's, I think, ultimately what we're looking at. It's awareness of like, have I stressed out about something? Has something been bugging me? Have I not been dealing with something? Am I avoiding something? Is there something I'm afraid of or worried about? Is there something that keeps nagging at me? And just kind of like playing around with that. And,
when does the location of the pain dictate some different area? I have,
Yes, it does.
Does it? Yeah. I had an experience where, I love acupuncture, and my acupuncturist was like, have you ever had any kidney problems? And I was like, that's actually funny. I have. And she goes, did you have a good support system at that time? Because anytime you have kidney problems, that the indication of that is that your support system is weak. And it was just that strange connection. I was like, wow, that's actually funny, because at that time I didn't feel like I had that. And so, that's kind of why I asked that question. So how do you go about, if you had a pain randomly in your shoulder, how would you go about researching that, or?
Yeah. Well, and this should definitely be another episode, so I'll give you the short version. First of all, what they say in the book is that it's very common for the, if we're going to call the culprit your ego, or this, triad of, these three musketeers that are always at war with each other, the id, the super ego, and the ego. They say in the book that the repressed emotional pain is going to show up as physical pain most easily from a past injury. So it's almost like it leaves a hole to be filled. So if you've had a past injury, that logically really gets people to be like, well, yeah, it's I did this thing in high school or college, and whatever, playing sports or whatever, it's flaring up again. I mean, how many times do you hear people saying like, oh yeah, my knee's flaring up again? And I feel like it's like it's kind of this like magnet for the outlet. That's one. Okay, but then obviously you have to say, well, how did the original injury happen, right? If you get to the source of the original injury, maybe that is also a TMS as well. But then there's the other way of looking at it, which is through the chakra system. And this really helped me when I was going through, energy healing work and stuff. So we have the 7 traditional chakras, right? That, start with 1 down, at our root, and 7 all the way up at our crown. Now, there are all kinds of conversations people have and say there's all kinds of other ones, but these are these almost like major meridian points or energy vortexes in our body. And these are connected to parts of our body. They're also connected to parts of our, internal organs. So internally and externally, if there is a blockage of energy there, then it tends to get manifested there physically. Okay? So, for example, chakra 2, which has all to do with emotions, tends to show up in anything from the legs down. And I've seen this in people all the time, right? But it's also another reason why stress, for most people, is carried where? In our neck and shoulders. Well, that's the throat chakra. And the 5th, and I mean, this is something we'll do an episode on this. We'll probably want to bring in an awesome expert to talk about this more, because I don't, obsess over this every day, but I learned it a long time ago and it stays with me. But chakra 5 is self-expression. Okay? Speaking your truth, baby. So what is stress? There is a quote that was on our fridge for years as a kid growing up. And it was like supposed to be like a gag quote, like funny things, like funny things that you'd find in like the paper and on the Sunday Times or something, like the comic strips. And it said, stress is what happens when your head says no, but your mouth says yes. And that couldn't be, it's like funny. Oh, that's so funny. But it couldn't be more accurate. So stress happens when we say yes to something. We commit to something that we either know we can't do or don't want to do because of time, because of energy level, whatever, right? Desire, all those reasons. So if we look at the times that we're stressed, is there a blockage of our self-expression? And is that manifesting physically in the neck and shoulder area? Perhaps. Maybe. Mine was in the mid-back, which is the 4th chakra, which is love. And to me, if I were to relate this to the chakra system, that was all about self-love and self-care. I mean, it was smack dab. Okay? So we'll make sure that there's an episode on this, because there's 7 chakras in the body, or 6, and then the 7th, the crown one, is like on top. And they each relate to a specific area in our lives, like love or self-expression or intuition, right? Oh, here's another one. Okay, so, one, especially chakra 1, is all about survival needs. So men especially get lower back pain. Why? Because it's the man's like core duty and urge and feeling of responsibility to be in charge of the basic survival things like money, shelter, survival of your kind, right? Protecting the family. And when our finances aren't in order, when we feel like, I don't know if I'm going to make it next month, I don't know if I'm going to be able to take care of the family, well, that's stressful, and it's going to show up in the lower back, Which brings me to the argument I want to make, the challenge I want to make about this whole cool trend thing about standing up while you work. Now listen, I have a stand-up desk, and I love standing up, and don't at times. It depends on what I'm doing. I'm sitting down right now. But I really, really, really want to challenge it. And I know people say, James, there are studies, there are books, you can't deny it. But this is exactly what this doctor and others have done for years. This isn't this stuff we're talking about didn't just come out. The quote we gave you at the beginning of this episode was someone from like the 1920s. So this is stuff that's been talked about. And don't get me into the controversy, which is in the book about, all the money in the medical industry is in surgeries and pharmaceuticals. We know that. So don't heal yourself because there's no money in it, right? But speaking to Phoebe's question about, is there a correlation with where the pain shows up in our body? Does it have a meaning in that? Well, there's a ton of examples in the book about the pain showing up where people didn't want to be, it prevented them from doing something they didn't want to do. The pain was there to prevent them from something they didn't want to do. And I forget some of the examples, but one person was typing and they hated typing, and all of a sudden they get these hand cramps. You know what I mean? This chronic pain, all of a sudden they develop arthritis and all these things. And then they realize, wait a second, I'm doing this typist job that I hate. And your body's trying to tell you, here's this conflict of this, I need to be doing this job because I got to have this great job and be working hard and be the best, but I don't want to do it. I don't enjoy this. I don't love it. And I would like to, question, is that what's going on here with this whole sitting epidemic? That sitting down is so bad for you, blah, blah, blah. Maybe the people being sampled that are having back issues, that are seeing chronic pain, health is being affected, not because they're sitting down, but because they know deep inside that they are sitting down at a job they friggin' hate, or something that feels like prison, that feels like no passion, no future, dead end, right? I don't know. Maybe, if you've been listening to everything we've been talking about, that makes more sense. However, the challenge here is, for all my left brain friends, is everything that we've talked about can all be argued from the left brain. You can do the x-rays, the MRIs, and all that stuff and say, no, look, there is the structural damage. And it's not that we deny, in this book, which I'm really prescribed to and promote, it's not that that's being denied. It's just saying the true source of it, the cause of it, is from something internal, like emotional, energetic. And I could see that. I could see that, you put two people sitting down for the same amount of time. One loves what they do more than anything. They are compelled, lit up with passion and joy every time they sit down. And the other person just hates their job and hates their life because of it. I don't know. Is one going to have more issues down the road? Maybe.
Well, I think for me personally, whenever, when I used to sit down and do things for people that, just to reinforce your point, that I didn't really enjoy doing. I'm like, oh man, I need to stand up. I need a break. Oh, my back is achy. It just doesn't feel right. But if I'm sitting even on my couch with terrible posture, yet I'm doing, I'm writing a really great email or something that I am really excited about, I think we get into the, the flow state and all this, and you just, time flies and you don't realize what you're doing. And then I stand up and I'm like, all right, let's go for a run or whatever. And I just feel energized, and I don't have that feeling of I feel cramped. So I think there definitely is something to be said for that. I'm excited to see, I guess, what the responses from our listeners is going to be, because this is a bit of a touchy subject. I know I've gotten into it with a couple people, friends, family, just about different issues, but how, your mind can, if we just kind of change our thoughts and beliefs, what impact could that have on the outcome of whatever it was that they were talking to me about. So I'm excited to see if people, accept this and take it on as a challenge, or if this is going to be kind of an immediate, rejection, because it's a touchy subject, but it's something that it's the hard work, really. Like taking a pill is the easy thing to do, but sitting down and, unpacking the mess is just, it's not pretty. It's not sexy. There's no part of that I'm like, all right, I'm going to sit down with a glass of wine and go for it, So I can definitely see it. And as you were going through it, I'm just nodding my head, being like, I get this. And I feel like, if we're getting super personal, I think there's a huge residual pain that I've had. I have sciatic nerve problems. And I feel it all the time. And now I'm like, well, maybe it is time to sit down with a glass of wine and unpack this mess. But there's something to be said for really taking this on as a challenge and seeing what comes of it as an experiment and see if you're able to kind of shift that at all.
Well, and speaking to the rejection, like someone might reject this. One thing is for certain. If someone is rejecting this information, that is simply the ego. That is the ego at play. And so I don't really think our listeners are going to reject it too much because, the name of the podcast is Mind Your Business. And what this really is creating a discipline of mindfulness in your life and how your business, the work you do with your clients and customers, it all affects everything. You have back pain when you're sitting down at the computer, like how great is the work going to be that you produce? Not so great, right? So one thing we can conclude is that if you immediately reject this, it's that ego. It's that damn ego that wants to keep you safe, not let you... It's repressing it because it doesn't want you... It's trying to protect you. It doesn't want you to deal with some of the things that you might have to deal with because it's tough. So there's a difference between something being simple versus something being easy. This is very simple, and we always look, the genius is when it's simple. And this is very simple. It's just repressed emotions and dealing with those. And if you're like, how do you do that? It's just read the book. But that doesn't make it easy. And I don't want to, take that lightly or let anybody think, oh, just because I did. Well, mine pales in comparison. We're talking about 2 days of pain or a day of pain versus people that have dealt with something like this for an entire lifetime. And it's simple work, but it can be the hardest thing you ever do. And so if you do reject it, see if you can take a moment, even just for a flash of an instant, wait a second, why am I rejecting this? Why am I so quick to say no? And its chances is because for years we've been telling the world that this is the physical pain issue I have. And it's actually become part of who we are in our super ego. To say it's not that, to say it's not that we have a condition, that we've had a bad knees from, doing this all our life, and to say that it's something else completely differently would threaten that super ego that's in place there.
Well, and, the way that we operate in the world right now is, with medication and all of this, I feel like it's masking, obviously this is kind of what I was saying earlier, but like masking the pain, which then doesn't allow you to feel that pain anymore. So, and I really do think that the more you medicate, without getting too much into it, but the more you medicate, the more it's telling your brain that you're not listening, or, you're telling your body that you don't care, because it's like, well, I'm going to continue to take this medication so that I can numb out. Then your brain, your body, if you tell a kid no 100 times, they're going to be like, all right, well, I'm going to stop asking. Well, maybe not a kid, but maybe me, but
maybe you, yeah.
if that's the message that you're sending your body, then, maybe your body starts to like kind of turn off, and then they don't give you that pain anymore. So I would say like seeing that pain as an opportunity and kind of an exciting opportunity to really shift something that's a little bit more serious than probably what we're giving credit to.
Even that glass of wine that's calling your name, Phoebe, is numbing it a little bit. Maybe you should do this without the glass of wine.
Hey, maybe. All right.
Maybe. Just some grape juice. So we want to leave you with a quote that really summarizes everything that we have been talking about on this episode. The quote says, "Disease is the report card of how happy we are. Feedback of a life not lived. Symptoms are anger flowing over into the physical realm, signs of internal conflict. Pain and illness are the virtual language of the unconscious mind. When we are untrue to ourselves and our needs, living by the codes and the wishes of others, denying our deepest desires, symptoms then form to reveal the deeper conflict." I want to thank all of our listeners for making it to the end of this mega episode and for keeping an open mind. I truly appreciate that. Thank you for allowing me the space to share my story and my healing journey with you. And I invite you to take the courage and the discipline to add more mindfulness into your life. Take care. Are you frustrated that no matter how hard you hustle, no matter how much you get done in a day, you still feel like you have little results to show for it? Do you feel like you're doing everything right, but there's still something missing? Well, what if there was an easier way? What if your business could be fun, effortless, and profitable? Phoebe and I have put together a free audio MP3 for you, compiling the 77 business affirmations for creating success from the inside out. And we want to give it to you absolutely free. This is your chance to rewire your brain for bigger results in your life and your business. To get instant access absolutely free, simply visit 77affirmations.com. That's the number 77affirmations.com.